Welcome to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. My name is Nina Joshi, and I am very excited to bring on our guest for today, Ella Seitz, who is a partner at Esplanade Ventures. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Nina. I'm excited to join you and the team.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, would love if maybe we can start things off by getting a little bit of an introduction and a background on you and kind of your journey that has led you to where you are right now.
Sure. So by background, I'm Russian, Ukrainian, and Israeli, but I've actually lived in the US and Canada for most of my adult life. My professional background is in finance and strategy. I spent about a decade in strategy management consulting, working with pharma, medical device, and consumer health clients, primarily in kind of growth strategy, innovation, and M&A work. And then from there, I transitioned to McKesson Corporation as Vice President of Strategy and M&A, really with responsibilities to help drive the digital agenda, first in Canada, and then across the US, Canada, and their European retail assets. Oh, wow. I got closer to kind of that startup impact and the innovation. McKesson's also a very acquisitive company. And that really kind of created that interest in venture and in startup. So I joined Esplanade as we were launching our first fund just before COVID. So it was a very interesting time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, good timing or interesting timing. At Esplanade, we're an early stage fund, so we're focused on seed through Series A digital health. And I drive a lot of our investment in women's health specifically. I'm happy to share that our partners in our second fund are extremely invested in advancing women's health, but also in advancing women in health tech, with a significant share of female CEOs in our portfolio. So let me pause here. I'm happy to dive deeper into any area.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I definitely want to, there's so much I'm curious about when it comes to the women's health aspects and kind of what you're seeing in that space. But before I just pick your brain on that side of the house, would love just to learn a little bit more kind of about this journey that you've had, I think kind of starting off in a very financially driven space and then kind of finding your way into the startup landscape. Was it something that you kind of always saw yourself doing? Did you just fall in love with, you know, the early stage, like ideas kind of side of things? Would love to kind of learn more like what that catalyst was for you.
Yeah, and I think we're in a time, and it's definitely true for millennials, but I think it's even more true for Gen Zs, where careers are a lot less linear. So no, I did not have my undergrad or MBA and be like, I'm going to be a venture capitalist. Today, that might happen. But as a finance graduate looking for a job in 2008, oof, there were not a lot of banking jobs. I felt really, really lucky to get into management consulting. And after my MBA, my interest in healthcare really grew, both from like personal experiences with the healthcare system that were really challenging for my family, but also becoming really aware of the huge cost problem that we're having kind of with aging demographics and all of the issues that I know this audience knows well. And so that was kind of my catalyst to get more involved in healthcare, and thinking about the system is so broken, how can I be helpful and impactful? And I think throughout my career journey, I found different ways to be impactful. And what really excites me about venture and startup is kind of the pace of change. Like we're really at the frontier. And being in venture and being a venture partner, I can work with a wide range of players, whether that's our portfolio companies, other investors, industry, which is really, really exciting. And, you know, specifically as I've been looking at healthcare, I've also been acutely aware of the issues around women's health, right? Like over 60% of women's health startups have been founded in the last 5 years. And, you know, 50% of the population, that's not very niche, but we just are starting to think about it. Most of the companies are kind of seed, Series A, they're very early on. And that's in contrast with the fact that us as women control over 80% of all healthcare spending and most of the healthcare decisions in households. So it's an underserved, underinvested area, but also with a lot of opportunity and a lot of potential financial returns and impact on healthcare.
100%. And I think on that note, would love to dive a little bit more into kind of the women's health, you know, lane that you're really focusing on with the venture. Would love if you could share a little bit more, you know, what types of things are you kind of seeing within the women's health space that is making you very excited? Where is kind of the general market going, knowing kind of to your point that there I think just now is more, it seems to be like visibility into, wow, we should probably start investing in women's solutions, even though they're meaningful and important, and we should have done it a while ago. Would love if you could kind of give us like a pulse of where things are and kind of what you're seeing in this area.
Yeah, so we've been following the area for a while, and it's really exciting to, come off a year like 2022, which was a record year in terms of women's health funding. It's still a drop in the bucket. So I'll give you an example. Like in Canada, our database has close to 80 women's health companies. Less than 10 of them have been funded, and only 2 of them have had 2 rounds of funding. Both of those, by the way, are led by men. So there's a lot of opportunity. As I mentioned, like women are kind of an ideal health customer. And I think we have the boomer generation that is kind of coming into that high consumption aged specific needs. So like think about menopause, bone health, kind of big areas that we're definitely invested in that are really interesting. Women have like unique healthcare challenges, right? And there are specific areas that disproportionately affect women, whether that's reproductive health, unique cancers, or even mental health. Like if you think about just the hormonal changes from pregnancy to postpartum to menopause, that really makes us very vulnerable. And we are a very large swath of the population with a disposable income and growing coverage that really makes that a very attractive VC market. In terms of kind of where I'm seeing a lot of opportunity, I think fertility and maternal health have kind of led the way in terms of areas that have seen a lot more investment in them historically. But over the last couple of years, menopause has really grown, and that's very exciting.
Definitely.
And I think there's still a lot to do in terms of just general women's health, cancers that are specific to women, that are really exciting.
Absolutely. And I'm so curious, I think because you started, I think, right when COVID happened, have you seen, I think, we hear a lot how COVID and everything that's happened in the pandemic has really shed light on a lot of, I think, existing like fractures in current systems. As someone that was kind of already thinking about investing in the market, like right when this happened, have you noticed anything like that? Is there more attention being given now to things like digital health or specific areas in women's health, anything like that?
Yeah, so I think digital health, absolutely. Like this was an inflection point. There's no doubt about it. Like we definitely had a big spike in 2021, but I think the tailwinds of COVID, or the silver lining, if we may, is the fact that the whole approach to healthcare changed. Like, yes, we still use the fax machine. We keep the fax machine alive. But the expectation around being able to see digital health solution as part of providing care, whether that's virtual care or a lot of different like software and hardware solution, has really shifted. And we've seen payers, we've seen the FDA and CMS really move the needle in terms of reimbursement. There's still a lot to be done. Like I think notably the breakthrough definition, for example, from the FDA, something that has left a lot of questions around reimbursement. The use of generative AI, which we're actively looking at, lots of questions, right? Healthcare is not necessarily a space where you can move really fast and break things, but you can move faster.
Definitely.
And you can make the patient experience, the provider experience, and even the payer incentives and experience better. So that's really exciting. And I think the access to data has made it better. I think specifically for women's health, like I think it has kind of been part of those tailwinds, but also because other areas have been so discovered, this white space is getting more attention and is benefiting it. And we have more founders that have successfully led and exited healthcare companies that now know what it takes to drive change within the healthcare system. And some of those are women, some of those are interested in women's health, and that's creating, I think, a compounding effect.
That's amazing to see that. Yeah, it is really interesting. I think you bring up a good point about not just the technology that's being developed, and I think at a rapid pace because of COVID, but just our expectations now are so different and what we want from a healthcare system. So yeah, it's really interesting to kind of, I'm sure you're just seeing it all kind of come together in the startup lens, which sounds actually kind of exciting. I love it.
It absolutely is. Lots of wood to chop here.
Yeah, definitely.
I would want to see these seed Series A, like few Series Bs and Cs get much further along, but it's very exciting. And I think we're also seeing mainstream digital health players and mainstream payers start to really care about women's health.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's definitely, we're headed in the right direction now. It's just how do we do it quicker and faster, but absolutely. I also really wanted to ask you too, I think thinking about a lot of the attention that's kind of being given into some of the areas within women's health that you mentioned, fertility, maternal health, all of that stuff. I know that you are a new mom. Congrats, by the way, but wanted to kind of get a sense from you, since you have, lived experience as well. What was that, I think, journey like for you? And did you uncover anything kind of being on the patient side of all of this?
Yeah, becoming a parent and having a child, finding a new normal, that's not easy for anyone. That's like one of those massive life events and changes. And, it's not like marriage or buying a house. You can get divorced, you can like sell your house, you can't unbirth a child.
Yeah.
Not that I would ever want to, but like as much joy as our daughter has given us, it's also been a time of profound anxiety, uncertainty. And I feel really fortunate to have had a great network of women, both friends, fellows in the investor community, as well as my partners that have really helped me navigate through this. Like I take kind of a long-term horizon where, being on mat leave and having a child, that's a few months in the span of a very long career, but important to spend with your family. And I got a lot of advice about getting good infrastructure. That's probably the best advice I could share and support. So it doesn't matter if it's like nanny, daycare, family, whatever works for you, but also being a health tech investor, I got to play with all the tech and the widgets. And I can tell you firsthand, like, oh, the really smart AI baby monitor that we love, or the Snoo bassinet that, gosh, if you value sleep and you can rent or buy one, like change your life. So I feel like that has given me an unfair advantage in some ways.
You need to have like some kind of blog or something where it's just like Ella's recommendations. By being a health tech investor, you probably know like all the new technology.
It's really so much easier than it was, even 10 years ago. It's so, and you get the lived experience. Like you can see all of these pediatric maternal health. We did not have the fertility needs, but I can appreciate at a very different level as an investor now. Like, we always talk about the founder problem or founder company fit. Like the investor fit is also important.
I love that. And I think kind of speaking to the investor fit and kind of the work that you've just been seeing both as a patient, but also as an investor, for those maybe that are listening in that are kind of in that phase, whether they are, pre-seed, just kind of have an idea, or are kind of actively growing a company, would love if you could share a little bit more about when it comes to your particular fund, or just, I would say, funds in general. What are some of the things that you look for in early stage companies? What are some of the hallmarks or the benchmarks that you use to evaluate?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't think it's unique for women's health versus any other area. Like we typically look at the market and the problem. And I would say when you're thinking about women's health with a lot of investors, it's really important to educate them because it's such a nascent space as to the size of the market. Yes, 50% of the population is big, and here's how we think about the TAM, and give it a little bit more color than you would maybe other areas. Like, we all know diabetes is a really big space.
Right.
So that would be one. The second is a specific problem you're trying to solve. We see a lot of kind of generalized solutions, and you want to have a balance between being a too small of a point solution where your TAM is not significant versus being so broad you're everything to everyone.
Right.
We definitely look at kind of the business model, how viable it is. We like to see some early traction. So kind of as late seed, not pre-seed investors, we want to see that there is some form of customer that's engaging with you, whether that's on research, on pilots, but that there is some kind of hints, I would call it, of product market fit.
Right.
Then there's the team and the founder fit, so important for early stage. Like, why are you the best person to solve this problem? Why are you well positioned? If you're solving, sleep, or if you're solving menopause, like how do you understand that?
Yeah.
And how do you understand your customers' needs? And then, there's always like the financials that we would look at, the exit, the other investors around the table. But those are probably kind of the key things I would start with. And obviously the defensibility, how unique your solution is.
Love that. No, those are good. Those are some really good, just like foundational things to consider. So if anyone is kind of in that phase right now, good good benchmarks. And also too, on that vein, do you have any, words of advice for folks that are kind of in a raising phase right now with this year, and just kind of given the market? I know we've just, heard so much about SVB and just, the volatility and all of those forces. So if there's any advice or any insight that you can shed, that would be also really great to hear too.
There's no sugarcoating. It's a challenging market environment right now. It won't be that way forever, but nobody has a crystal ball. So I would say, if the first question I would have is, do you need to raise right now? Do you absolutely have to? If there are grants, funding, ways that you can get creative around not needing funding, it will be a better environment, I hope, in 2024. So the first one is, do you really need to raise? The second is, how can you show that you really have the path towards growth, towards profitability? I think that today's investors are much more sensitive to really seeing a lot of traction even earlier, seeing more experienced entrepreneurs that have really batted around and tested the idea. And so I would say, in general, what we're seeing, for example, for seed stage companies, is much more mature companies that have been around for longer and often have some initial contracts. And so I know that's hard to do, but the more you can do before you raise, I think the better off you are in terms of the quality of investors that you can attract and valuation. And then I think on the other side, if you do have to raise, live to fight another day. It's hopefully this is not your last round of funding. This is about finding the right partners to help you grow your company to the next milestone. And so taking a long-term view, I think, is helpful.
Love that. Good, words, life lessons, words of advice. Very, very helpful. And I also wanted to ask you too, I think, being able to sit where you are and kind of just get that bird's eye view. I'm really curious. I think we've heard a lot about, things like generative AI. There's a lot of these, new technologies, these kind of buzzwords. What is kind of your take on some of these new modalities? Are you kind of starting to see it, within the pipeline of the companies that you're looking at? Is it something that you and the team are kind of thinking about investing in, or is it a wait and see? Kind of curious to get your take on some of just these new things that have, I think, proliferated just all of our thoughts when it comes to healthcare.
Yeah. So we've been long-term investors in AI from our first fund. I think over 50% of our investments are in AI and health tech. So definitely don't think it is something that is going away. I think the big difference with generative AI is really understanding its application and its power and how quickly it is changing and being adapted. I think it's incredible to see clinicians asking for this, asking for change. Clearly they're at a crazy burnout level. There are many reasons and challenges we won't go into, but the level of adoption and experimentation, I don't want to compare it to the internet. And there's a lot that we don't know. We're definitely not on the sidelines. We're in fact, we just signed a term sheet for a generative AI company in the admin space we're super excited about. So we're definitely not on the sidelines, but we are also thinking about it in terms of where can the technology, given what we know now, be best applied. Right. And I think a lot of that is kind of in the lower hanging fruit around administrative and support, where the hallucinations are less of a risk and it's really enabling and supporting. It's not doing diagnostics, right? You don't want to get that wrong.
Yeah.
But a lot will change. I can tell you our fund's perspective in March versus our fund's perspective on generative AI in July. We're revising it on a continuous basis. So it's very dynamic, which is very exciting. That is, but also makes it an interesting funding environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is so just fascinating to see all the applications. And that definitely does make a lot of sense in terms of, the intentionality behind how exactly is this being applied versus just the fact that it is a technology. So I absolutely love that. I also realize that we are about 7 minutes out, so I want to have some time for questions. So one of the questions that we have is, what is the best thing about working in the venture space? And then another question that I'm going to add on is, what would you want to change in the space?
Okay, best thing and what do I want to change? I mean, the best thing for me is the fact that I get to work with really amazing founders and amazing teams and help, drive their growth and success. I could be talking to our menopause company one day that is trying to help, like, historically women for so long had to kind of suffer in silence during the prime of their lives, right? And now our portfolio company Ember sold over 150,000 units, and they actually allow women to experience relief from hot flashes. Super cool company. At the same day, I could be talking to a bone health company out of the Bay Area that is helping the 52 million Americans that are suffering from osteopenia, a condition for which there's literally no solution. Like, for now, the clinical guideline is wait until you get osteoporosis and just work out and get a lot of calcium. Like, can you imagine if someone told you you almost have cancer, but let's just wait until you do to do something about it? Like, that's unacceptable.
100%.
So the amount of impact that we can have, and the fact that in venture I could have it across many different, like, we have 17 portfolio companies, is just so exciting.
That's amazing.
Your other question was, what would I change? That's a good question. I think there's still very few women in venture and women in investing. And I think we all have to help bring the next generation of women along. And that's probably true for founders as well. We're just so underrepresented. And because of that, there are less solutions for us. And so I think it's like, how do we help each other?
Absolutely. That's amazing. And we have another question that is, how can a startup best reach out to investors? Any specific strategies you like to see?
Good question. So we are big fans of getting to know and see you through different events, for example. So HITLAB for women's health has a great event that my friend Susan Solinsky runs. Health in, I think it'll be in October this year, or Vive. Great conferences. There's also HIMSS. Being at those events, there's typically like really good networking. I'm assuming this question is more for early stage companies, whether it's funding founders or other events like that. You can reach out and send us a good summary. Like, we do actually look at every lead that comes in. However, we do look at a lot of companies and we engage more on those that have a fit, just to be transparent. But that is always good. And then building your network. So whether that's through other founders, other investors, like, I'm a big fan in networking. When you meet somebody, like, you ask them, who else should I be talking to? Like, who else do you think, like, if that's not a fit, who else do you think might be interested in helping us? And, you know, build your network that way.
I love that. That's great advice. And another question that we have is, any words of advice for younger women who want to be investors? What do you look for in a firm?
In a firm, so as you're trying to get hired, I would say, like, shockingly, I found venture to be harder to get into than management consulting, and I would not consider management consulting really easy. It's very niche, actually. There's not a lot of people, there's not a lot of roles. I think if you're getting started in venture, the most important thing is to get started.
Right.
So take the job, get into the industry. If you have multiple options, which would be amazing, then I would think about kind of growth. So especially if you're early in your career, like, do you have the opportunity to get the right mentorship and ultimately sponsorship? And to what extent do you have exposure to the entire deal life cycle? So a lot of times you might only have exposure to the pipeline or due diligence. Can you see more? Can you see, depending on the fund, if they do activities beyond like value creation and really working with founders, that can be quite helpful. And then, of course, if there is a fit in terms of areas of your interest, like some funds are generalists, others like us at Esplanade, we really focus on health tech. So if you are interested in a specific area and you know that for yourself, like, that's a great fit. If you can be passionate about what you do and have fun doing it, like, that's amazing, right?
Absolutely. That's incredible. And I think this actually is a great segue to another question that we have, which is, did you have a mentor during your career?
Yes, I'm fortunate to have had a few. One that really comes to mind that helped me in my healthcare journey. So when I first joined my old consulting firm, there was one female partner in the Toronto office. Not always great odds, but, you know, Toronto's also a smaller office. And she has really been excellent at helping me think through my career and supporting me. I've since been to several roles since, and we stay connected. She has met my daughter, but she also is a great person to bounce ideas off and to think about kind of career, and forming those authentic relationships are super important. She also helped me expand my knowledge of kind of the healthcare industry. But it's about fit. And, together we started a big women's health chapter in Toronto within our office that has helped a lot of young female consultants get into the healthcare space, which is super exciting. And so I think it's about both paying it forward and being part of it. Like, I feel very fortunate now to be both a mentor and a mentee and getting involved.
That's
and I think we all have to do it. To my earlier point, we need to help more women get into the space.
100%. I love that you're definitely kind of being able to practice it too and kind of see it on both ends. And when it came to a mentor, how does one kind of find a mentor? Was it something that you did just kind of like through, I know you had mentioned in a previous question about like events and things like that, where you're kind of able to be in these spaces. Is that kind of how you're able to get that network and to find mentor opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are structured programs, and I would encourage everyone that is looking for a mentor to get involved. Like in Canada, we have a great Canadian Women in VC, and we just launched this year's mentorship program, and I'm a mentor there. For me specifically with this wonderful individual, it was actually intentional. So I saw her as somebody I really admired, that was a thought leader. She's very involved with the World Economic Forum, drives a lot of healthcare thinking. And I was like, I need to get to know her. So I was just thoughtful about what work is she doing and how can I be helpful to her. And over time, we built a great personal relationship. A funny anecdote, I'm now a mentor to her son as he's trying to find his way to venture. So it really is like, it comes full circle.
Absolutely.
And I think it's about finding the right click. Like it's not quite like dating, but it's kind of like dating. Like there are other mentors that have been assigned or had that were a better fit or a fit for a certain period of time and then not a fit. It happens. It's fine.
I love that. It's a very good connection to make. It 100% is a little bit like that, just kind of finding the right fit. I do realize that we are almost at time. So my favorite question to ask to kind of end our discussion is, do you have any words of wisdom that you wanted to share? Any either career advice that you got from someone, anything you heard? Just any general career words of wisdom.
That's a good question. I think I mentioned this a little bit before, but to me, it's about finding the intersection of kind of interest and opportunity to have meaningful impact. And if you can find that, that is, I think, a recipe for a really good career. And what I mean by opportunity and impact is also whether you're driven by financial or social returns, whatever those are, if you can do things that you really love, or at least see the path, it's not linear, but you're going to enjoy it so much more. So I feel so lucky to be at the intersection of health tech and women's health, where we see a lot of financial opportunity for our LPs and for our startups, but also like I get to collaborate with amazing founders working on problems that I deeply care about. And so it doesn't feel like just work.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for this very enlightening discussion. Really, really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today, Ella.
My pleasure, Nina. Thanks for having me.